Hi, this is Anthony with another politics episode of Pile and Pop. With me, as usual, for politics episodes is Woody. How you doing tonight, Woody?
I'm all right.
So today, as we're recording this, it's October 17th. It's the night after the Kamala Harris Fox News interview, and no black swan events have happened since the last time we recorded, and a sneaking suspicion that one more may occur yet, but the way it works out with my amount of recording time per month, I figured it was good to get this up before my recording month ends, regardless. And there's enough to talk about anyway. And if anything else happens, we can get to it after it happens. If there's some huge event next week, for example, we can record again then. So let's talk about the Kamala Harris interview from last night first. So what are your opening thoughts on that, or maybe initial impressions or whatever?
Initial impressions, first of all, it's good that she went into the lion's den,
Yep.
called Fox News, and took questions. She did get a little agitated at times, and they talked over each other, but that's to be expected when you have Fox interviewing a Democrat. So it kind of went as expected, I thought. The only thing I can say is that she held her own.
Yes.
But when you read the pundits the next day, they each favor their side, so it's not going to change the base's opinion.
Yeah. With me, with my viewpoint on it, I had recorded it in DVR, so I watched it from there, and then it was going into some Fox people commenting right afterwards. And I'm like, okay, well, stop it here, and I'll just go ponder it, write up a Facebook post about it. So I did that, and without hearing anyone else's opinion first, just to have a sense of where I was afterwards. And my perspective was she killed it. She did really well. The only thing that I felt was not that good was the very first part. Basically, Brett Baer jumped in with he had a bunch of gotchas, but the first gotcha was the whole thing with the border, and it's how many illegal aliens have you let out into this country since you took office, or how many are out there? Is it 10 million? Is it 5 million? He's trying to pin her down to a number or something like that. And he hit her with the toughest thing that I think you could possibly hit a Democrat with, in Biden or Harris, say, which was basically, since you changed the Remain in Mexico policy and then you're letting people out into this country, we had 3 occurrences where an illegal immigrant that you let out killed somebody. And here's a video of the mom of one of them talking about that. And it's wow, that is a really hard-hitting start, I mean, Kamala Harris, to her credit, of course, she's well, that's terrible, and she was very sympathetic to the victims. But there's only so much you can say about that. It's these people would have been alive if not for your policy.
Well, I can comment on that.
So can I, but you first.
I will comment that issue aside, but what's related is that the Democrats had a bill. They were going to pass it.
Yeah.
But what did Trump do? He said, don't vote for it.
Exactly.
So regardless of whether she could have done things earlier, she still tried to get it done. And again, it always comes down to blaming Harris when Biden's still the president.
Yes.
That takes me off.
There was definitely tying with what you said and agreeing with what you said, looking at it in a way that corresponds with it but slightly differently. The bill that they had passed, bipartisan bill earlier this year, that Trump convinced the House not to take up so it didn't get passed, was say 9 months ago, something like that. Maybe not quite. Had that passed, things would have been stricter, and I'm sure there are some illegal aliens who would have been dealt with in some sort of proper, humane way, who instead were roaming about and killed some people. And it was probably more than 3.
Yes.
That's my guess. So if you want to play the game of who screwed up and there are these people that got killed, I mean, look, any death is terrible, by all means, with regard to this type of thing. But you have to do a math thing to some degree with, okay, we found 3 that got killed because of your policy. And then you look at Trump with COVID, for example. How many people do you think died from COVID because of Trump's policies?
Absolutely.
Let alone illegal immigrants and them killing people. You can play the who died more game all sorts of places, all sorts of ways. But he found a way to hit and try to personalize 3 people, boom. okay, I guess the Democrats with the abortion stuff, they did something with, here's 3 people who had terrible outcomes and all because of abortion laws and all. But,
that brings me to a point. Kamala keeps talking about the future.
Yes.
Instead of hopping on the past. It's terrible that you said that people died and everything.
Yes.
But you have to put that behind you and try to do it to help the country in the future. Talking about the past is not going to solve the problems that we have now.
Right.
Trump and his supporters want to talk about the past. And what she did is trying to say, what are you going to do to change that?
Right.
She has ideas. In fact, past couple of days I heard in the news, she was talking about policies that she wants to do. What has Trump said? All he does is cut down on Kamala.
With the border stuff, she talked about how, and she was clever how she worded this. What she was basically saying was, like, within hours of taking office, like the first thing they did was pass some border thing, or executive order, I think, for the border. But she's like, before we did this and this, and like infrastructure, CHIPS Act, blah, blah, blah. So it's like she kind of indirectly mentioned all these other good things that they did. Before we did all that, we did this border thing. So they had put some policy of sorts in place. Obviously, more needs to be done. But it's not like they weren't doing anything. So she had that as part of the counter argument as well. Another thing I want to note in general with the interview is that Bret Baier kept interrupting her. There was a lot of talking over each other.
Yes.
And I felt like the fault was on his part. She definitely called him out on it. She's like, I'm trying to answer your question. You got to let me finish answering your question here.
Well, I agree with you, because if he's the moderator, he's the one asking the questions. What good is asking the questions if you don't permit the person to answer? And then when she's answered, then he can come back with whatever he needs to come back with. Mm-hmm. But they kept trying. She was partly at fault too. Okay. Neither one could finish because they were trying to get the point in, and that caused what you saw. Yeah.
Well, Bret Baier, in theory, is considered a relatively fair-minded journalist. Fair and balanced is what Fox would say, obviously. Most of it's not, but among people at Fox News, hearing Bret Baier, I'm like, yeah, I remember him from like 2000, and he was around back then, and he was never like a Hannity type or whatever, commenting with these extremist viewpoints. No. He's a relatively straight-laced kind of guy for Fox. But in this interview, I think Trump scared him, and he's like, well, I got to go after her with all this.
That would be.
But even if it wasn't Trump scaring him, still, I think it's good that they went all out, that they hit her as hard as they could. Because if you go, like you said, the Lion's Den, if you go into the Lion's Den at all, you get some credit for it. And if you go in there and you hold your own, and you don't have any moments where it's like, wow, you didn't have any answer for this, or you don't have anything to say about this, or whatever. And she had good responses throughout everything. Like, another example, there was a part where she was talking about, was it the enemy inside or the enemy within? I think it's the enemy inside.
Within.
The enemy within.
I think that's what she said.
Okay. But the concept is there regardless. Trump has said this a bunch of times. Kamala Harris had a rally in Pennsylvania earlier this week where she's like, please roll the tape. And it had a bunch of instances where Trump is talking about basically the people who disagree with him in this country and how he wants to go after them in possibly legally or militarily, which is like fastest dictator types of stuff. It's like, you're a dictator and you silence the opposition and whatnot. Different levels of it, and some are worse than others. But if you're locking up an opponent...
His last administration, his cabinet, they didn't agree with him. What did he do? He got rid of him.
Right.
It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, except in this case, we're talking legal...
Well, yes, it's different now.
Well, it happened with Michael Cohen, where apparently he was going to get out of jail, and Trump applied some pressure and got him back into jail. That was rough, but wasn't going to go into that. Just thought of that at the moment. So you mentioned the enemy aside thing. So then Bret Baier played a clip from Donald Trump from earlier in that day, because there was a town hall that he had with Harris Faulkner, is the name of the conservative black lady journalist who was leading that. Well, first off, I want to say it sounded like it was a town hall about women. They're like, okay, great, undecided voters. Like, no, it turns out it was just a whole bunch of Trump supporters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I heard that.
So it's like, these are not undecided voters. This is a cheerleading section. This is an extremely non-hostile environment. So they played a clip of his response. Basically, he had some stuff to say to defend himself, but the part they played was edited out. He mentioned the enemy within thing a little before that clip in the answer to that question.
But you just said, I saw that, the clip they cut out,
Mm-hmm.
Jon Stewart put it back in and redid it. I saw it. And he said, wait a minute, they left something out. And he did it in his own style. I'm not Jon Stewart, because I pulled that up after I saw the interview. And I said, what does he have to say about it? And sure enough, just like you said, they had edited out, he put it back in. And, you know, he has those looks that he gives. And yeah.
I saw it through other like independent news sources, but same thing, right? In all instances of this, the people caught it and they, you know, like here's it without editing and with the right context.
Right.
And in fact, in the interview, Kamala Harris called him out on it. He's like, well, this is not what Trump has been saying. And she didn't quite say, oh, you took out part of that same clip. She was like, you look at what he has been saying.
Yeah,
Talking about the stuff she referenced in that one rally.
She repeated that a few times, and he wouldn't listen to it. Bear wouldn't listen to it.
Yeah.
She kept saying, but this is what he's been saying.
Yeah.
And he avoided it and came with another question.
Right. It's not like, oh, this was what he was running on in 2019, and therefore he means this, because that's what they try to get her on all the time. This is stuff he's been saying up through that morning.
Right, yeah.
This is his current mentality, his current arguments and stuff that he says in all sorts of different interviews. It's not far-fetched to think that this represents who he is and where he stands and what he believes and what he wants and all now, as opposed to like, oh, Kamala Harris was against fracking in 2019. Well, she was in a primary running left to people. She's had a lot of experience in the White House since then. And when you actually have the nomination, you probably want to be a little more centrist. And I don't think she is going to be some anti-fracking zealot when, you know, you can find other ways to be environmentally friendly.
I got 2 words. I'm going to say something. I'm going to make a comparable.
Okay.
Joe Lieberman was a Democrat.
I like Joe Lieberman. He was great.
He didn't agree with everything Democratic, so he went independent.
Yeah. He lost a primary.
Right. But you can change. If you really believe in it, you can change. You can't criticize somebody for changing their policies because they found out that maybe that's not the way they're going.
Right.
But with Trump, if you change, of course, you know.
Trump doesn't really have any hard and fast views anyway, and he'll say all sorts of stuff. He'll say whatever in any situation
makes him look good.
Make him look good. And I mean, look at the abortion thing, for example. First off, obviously, he put 3 Supreme Court justices in that overturned Roe versus Wade. We know that.
Yeah, you can't get away from that.
So you could say, okay, he's very pro-life. Okay, so if you're pro-life, you think, all right, great. And now pro-life is not that popular anymore. So he's trying to back away from that. So it's like, okay, he doesn't have any pro-life principles where he's like Mr. Pro-Life. He said he's the father of IVF. I don't know what the heck that means. I don't know if I even want to research what that means. Part of me is curious, and part of me is like, that's so ridiculous. Is it even worth my time to delve into? But yeah, they played that clip, and Harris called him out on like, this is not what he's been saying.
Now you said that Bear was supposedly fair.
Well, his history before this interview is that he's generally been a relatively fair person among the Fox News
That's
people.
just at Fox.
Yes.
And all I can say is that there was another guy named Chris Wallace who
Yes.
got tired of the crap with Fox and left. How fair could they be if you're with Fox? He said, no, I'm not putting up with this anymore.
Yeah.
And that also reminds me of 60 Minutes, and I'm old enough to remember when it first started. Those guys were hard. Mike Wallace, Ed
Wallace,
Bradley.
Chris Wallace's father, Mike Wallace.
Anyway, those guys, they would ask the hard questions. They wouldn't back down, but they were fair. Fox is bias. That's the difference.
Remember Shepard Smith?
I remember the name.
He was on Fox News. He was like the news guy, and he ended up leaving too because it was it's just too much bias. You couldn't get like straight, reasonable, centrist reporting. You know, even with like the news.
Right.
I mean, I get if your commentators want to go off the deep end. Okay, that's fair. There's some degree of that on the left with MSNBC as well, I'm sure. But there has to be a point where we're going to report some factual news information. But one thing to keep in mind with this Kamala Harris interview on Fox is there's a lot of stuff in there that Fox News viewers probably have not heard before. Like, Mark Milley is not supporting Trump and had some very negative things to say about it.
Oh, yeah.
So they probably didn't even hear about that. So another thing that was a gotcha that Bret Baier went after her for was basically she's saying negative things about Trump. And then he's like, well, why is it like 50-50? if that's the case, if he's as bad as you say he is. And then she says, this is a presidential election. It's not supposed to be easy. This is not supposed to be a cakewalk. Then his perspective was, well, are Trump voters just dumb? So he's trying to throw that at her. You know, remember Hillary was like the basket of deplorables thing?
Right, yeah.
And she's like, no, I would never say that about the American people. In fact, Trump's the guy who's belittling people and, you know, saying bad things about them and all that. So she turned that around. So no gotcha there. You're not going to get her with that Hillary Clinton snobbishness of we're so smart and they're so dumb. You know, it's like, no. I mean, I guess she could have taken the perspective of they don't know me well enough yet or they're misinformed or whatever, but she did better than that.
Yeah.
What she said was better than that, in that she said, no, that she trusts the American people. These are good people, but elections are hard. That's just how it is. That was a good way of putting it. Don't delve into the thing like, well, this bias is this and this is this, and you just spat all this stuff out there. She didn't go super offensive on that. She said it in a good way, handled it better than I would have. Then the other thing is there's a trope of like the angry black woman or something. And some of the commenting is that people are going after her for that. Like she's an angry black woman. And I looked at that, and part of my commentary on it when I wrote a Facebook post after watching it was that she was not angry. She was calm and firm. And looking at it again, like, okay, she was angry, but not at Bret Baier. She was angry at Donald Trump. And I think that was what I would call a controlled anger.
Who said she was an angry black woman?
I'm not sure who
because
said
I thought she was an angry. I thought she wasn't black. That's what they kept saying. Now she's black.
According to Trump, apparently she became black. She was
yeah.
But not, whatever. All right. She's half black and half Indian, and she has never claimed otherwise.
That's right.
And she went to a historically black college and university, HBCU.
Yes. So
no one was ever like trying to pull the wool over eyes, like, oh, she's not black, and now that it's advantageous to say you're black, now she's black. No. Yeah, sometimes people are mixed race. It happens. It's not a unique thing here. You know, it's like,
That's
get
right.
over it. So there's that whole angry black woman thing. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, she wasn't angry at Bret Baier. She was angry at Trump. She was using anger in what I would say is a controlled, constructive way to call out Trump, as opposed to Trump where you get under his skin and he gets angry and he's like, they're eating the cats and they're eating the dogs.
Yeah, well.
You know, like that's Trump anger. That's like lost control anger. She was not lost control anger or got offended by difficult questions anger. I mean, just thinking about it, just the comparison where you look at, like we were just referencing, where Trump went to the National Association of Black Journalists and they come after him right away, very similarly to this interview. He's like, wow, what a nasty question to start out. He's getting all offended and everything. And it's just, you can't be getting all offended and personal attacks and everything, you know, to go after these people. It's a great degree of weakness.
It's not presidential.
It's not presidential. People are going to be adversarial. John McCain at one point talked about the adversarial press and how it's a very good thing to have that. You know, I mean, this is a higher quality of human being. When you have like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go on this stuff. I'm going to make my case to the adversarial press. And you're going to not always be fair to me, but that's how it is.
But you got to word it correctly with the right tone. We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
And McCain knew how to say it in the proper way and still get his point across.
Yeah, he was great. But with Trump, yeah, I mean, he was going to do a 60 Minutes interview like Kamala Harris did, and he didn't end up doing it. Or he hasn't, at this point, he hasn't said he's going to do it. I don't know if he still would, but I doubt it. Last time he had a 60 Minutes interview 4 years ago with Leslie Stahl, he ended up getting upset about it and walking out in the middle of the interview.
Yeah, I remember that.
He can't handle it. He can't do the equivalent of what Kamala Harris just did last night with going into the lion's den and maintaining your cool and giving reasonable answers to very tough questions. And there are always very tough questions that the other side will throw at you.
Yeah, you got to expect it.
Given the opportunity. So you would think that people would realize and understand that. Which brings me to kind of these other viewpoints about it. So I did listen to some various commentary about it. Not everybody is all caught up necessarily, but part of it was, like we said, about the Jon Stewart thing you mentioned, which I saw, I think, the David Pakman show, and maybe one or two other places with this clip was out of context, and here's the whole clip, and all that. So in terms of other viewpoints, Chris Cillizza, formerly of the Washington Post and CNN, has some independent media source now of his own, and his perspective was there was only one thing in the interview that mattered, and it was that Kamala Harris said that her presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. That was definitely one part that she said in there. And that could be a very positive thing, especially given the gotcha of when she went on The View and said she couldn't think of anything she would have done differently than Joe Biden. Well, she had an answer for that now. And of course, Bret Baier threw that out of her as well, because
there's only one problem with the answer.
What's that?
Not the answer itself, but if people, Trump supporters, maybe some other people, would look at Biden's record, what he's actually done, continuing some of his policies is not a bad thing. He did some good stuff. But they won't give Biden credit for anything, so she has to separate herself.
Yes. You don't want to throw him under the bus completely, but there has to be some separation. Remember, Biden's approval rating is somewhere in the 30s.
Right.
If it was, someone was saying if it was 75, then it would be fine to say, I'm just going to continue where he left off, where he's leaving off. But the way it works, you have to be able to say we got some new ideas. Now, the beautiful thing of like, I would have done this and this and this and this differently is that you can use hindsight. Like pulling out Afghanistan did not go well. So you can just, if you're going to lie like Trump, you can be like, oh, I would have known that Afghanistan, that everything was going to get taken over if we pulled out. So I would have, who knows what, stayed in there or gone out at a different time or done this differently or done that. Yeah. Rose-colored glasses, hindsight's 20/20.
What's the other thing he said? He said that if I had been president, Russia would have never taken over Ukraine. You're going to stop Putin from taking or annexing Ukraine right next door.
It's very important to remember that while Trump was president, Putin was working on getting us to get out of NATO and basically working towards dissolving NATO. And he was making some good progress on that with Trump because he was playing Trump like a fiddle. So that's part of why he didn't have to invade Ukraine then, because he wasn't in that situation. You don't invade Ukraine because things are going well. You invade Ukraine because you're trying to hold on to power and you need to do something like that. So obviously that has not gone well, and obviously Biden has rallied all these other countries well against Putin, and Ukraine is still hanging in there pretty well. So, Chris Cillizza's interesting point that's like the biggest thing that would only make any difference. Maybe the only line in there that would make any difference of note. See, another part with my viewpoint in general with it is I felt like there were a lot of talking points that she had said before and just pieces of information that is very helpful to get out there to these Fox News viewers because they probably had not heard them before. Now, some of it they had heard before if they had seen the debate, which maybe they saw, maybe they didn't. But, like Trump killed the border bill, for example. That's a very compelling argument. He wants to run on a problem instead of solving a problem because he wants the political advantage. That's a very strong argument. So it's good to get that out there, and that was even in the vice presidential debate. But in terms of other comments, Brit Hume, a longtime Fox News guy, he had a very reasonable reaction when Kamala Harris and Donald Trump debated, where he acknowledged that she won, that she did well, and it was a bad night for Trump, a good night for her. In this one, I don't remember exactly what he said, but my understanding was that he was reasonably positive towards her performance. Bret Baier himself was on other Fox News stuff after that, and one thing he said was she probably got her sound bites if she wanted to do that. It seems like that was probably her agenda, and she probably got that. And someone even said Bret Baier was visually shaken in one of his appearances after that, and I can't vouch for that one way or the other.
I don't know. I haven't
but they said that. So, I mean, she did very well. I thought, I said.
If he was shaken, I can understand it from seeing parts of the interview that she stood her ground. And he might not have expected her to be that forceful, and he didn't know what to do with it.
I don't think he did.
I think surprised
some of the sexist tropes of the man bullying the woman and talking over her and all that, and she's like, I guess she's used to it. It's unfair, but you're in an unfair situation your whole career. You get better at dealing with these things, I guess. So the other reaction that I saw was, obviously, Megyn Kelly, a female conservative, used to work for Fox News. She has her own independent thing now. Basically, some lady on The View had tweeted something about how Kamala Harris's appearance on Fox News is certainly going to sway some female voters who, I guess, saw Kamala Harris being talked over by Brett Baier and stuff like that.
Who was it? Was it Joyce Baier or Whoopi?
No, it wasn't Joy or Whoopi. It was Alyssa.
There's another one, but I don't know her name.
I don't remember the name, unfortunately. But another lady on there, liberal lady.
Yeah, I know that.
So Megyn Kelly had to respond to that, and she's like, "No, they don't. I worked there for 14 years, and they don't." Basically, it's like no one's going to be swayed by that. And then it's kind of like, well, you worked there. It doesn't mean, like, did you talk to all the audience members while you were there? No one's going to be persuaded. But then I looked at the comments on her Twitter post, Megyn Kelly's reply and the comments on Megyn Kelly's reply. And basically all these people are like, yeah, Kamala Harris did terribly and she lost ground and she, just all sorts of negative stuff. I'm like, this was probably the first negative stuff I'd seen as it worked out timing-wise. And it was really kind of jarring because I felt like it was pretty much a given that she had done quite well. And then I see all this and I'm like, I was living on the same planet. Did you watch the same interview I watched? But one thing I thought about is that, well, I don't think you can respond to a tweet if you're not subscribed to that person's channel or whatever. So maybe that's part of why, like, everyone on there is in the tank supporting Megyn Kelly already. So some people were a little bit more fair and reasonable about it even still. But it's amazing to look at it and see the exact same thing and to have viewpoints that are so much different. I mean, I guess I can understand it if there's some sort of like, oh, I didn't pick up on some body language thing as much. Maybe didn't really notice Tim Walz was nervous at the beginning of the debate or whatever because I was much more focused on the actual words that were said or whatever. Okay, I get that. I know I'm more focused on words and not as focused on these other things that people jump on as these huge deals sometimes. And I'm certainly much better at the objective than I am at the subjective.
Not everybody's objective.
Right.
I thought some people are so biased, it becomes a habit, and they naturally just filter out what they don't want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's really what's going on. It's that these people... I'd like to look at it like, is there something I don't know or I don't understand or I don't get about what's going on? And maybe it just is they've already made up their minds and they're going to decide this is just terrible no matter what.
We have talked about, it's sort of the same about religion, how people base everything on religion. They don't try to think for themselves. They just spew what people tell them to. And it's the same thing here. Trump tells them this is the way it is. That they're not thinking. They're just repeating what Trump says.
I remember in the presidential primary debates on the Republican side this cycle, Mike Pence was one of the guys in the mix, and I definitely don't agree with him on policy, but I remember watching at least one of the debates and thinking, Mike Pence came across as a good guy and did a good job. And I think that is being more objective by far than these people who are watching the Kamala Harris interview and acting like she screwed herself over and did so terribly or whatever. And I guess that's what it is. It's like, this is what it means to be able to be more objective. You have to be able to look at it and say, this person who is, maybe stands for everything I don't or stands against everything I believe in or whatever, if they seemed likable and did a good job, I can give them credit. Like I've said before, I was a Republican in 2000. I remember I watched the vice presidential debate, and I'm like, I like this Joe Lieberman guy. He's coming across quite well. And eventually, maybe sometimes you change political parties. If you're like, all these guys come across quite well, and all these people come across terribly.
Well, the best example of that is Bernie. Bernie Sanders, he might be liberal than one on the other side, but he speaks intelligently, and you really can't get on him.
I have a ton of respect for him. I know that I disagree with a lot of his extreme stuff and the democratic socialist stuff, but he's a very likable guy, and he believes in himself. He's very authentic, and he's quite a good speaker.
That's a good word, authentic.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of difference, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Not everybody sees that.
Hillary Clinton was extremely non-authentic.
Yeah, That's true.
There's your contrast. And
Absolutely.
Hey, Clinton and Sanders, there you go, 2016. They obviously were right up against each other there. Authenticity is good. Sometimes you have to go out on a limb a little bit and take some risks with your policy. But it is fascinating to see these people that are so biased that they can't look at something and say, Kamala Harris did a good job. And like I said, part of me has to question my own opinion. Wait, did she not do a good job? But I think what it does is, in reality, I think, she did do a good job. And it reminds me that most people watching Fox are still going to think she's terrible. And they're not going to be convinced by hearing these things that they haven't heard before, like I said, with General Milley and stuff like that.
It's hard to listen to what they either of them have to say when they're bantering back and forth and not let the other one finish.
Yeah.
You have to sift through all that and try to figure out what they're trying to say.
Yeah, there was definitely some of that. But she got a lot of stuff in, and she even, at the end, she's like, okay, and if you want my policy proposals, KamalaHarris.com, there's a whole big list on there. Someone was saying it was a missed opportunity because she didn't go into her policy proposals, but she went after Donald Trump a lot and all that. Like, well, I thought what she did worked out well, and she was building off of the questions that were asked.
That's the point. Why go out to say or talk about her policies? She's answering his questions. And if he had to answer about policies, I'm sure she would have said, okay. But,
Yeah. So, any other thoughts on the interview before we move on to some other stuff?
Now, I just wonder if she's going to have any more of those types of interviews.
Yeah, that is a good question. What happens from here? So, there probably won't be any more debates because Donald Trump said no to the next, to anything further. And we're at the point now, it's already October 17th. How much can you even fit in anyway? It would be interesting if Donald Trump did an adversarial interview.
Won't happen.
If he did, he would probably walk out after 5 minutes because he couldn't handle it. And then the contrast would be obvious to anyone who's even remotely objective. It's like Kamala Harris went into the Lion's Den at Fox, lasted the whole time. It seemed to be going well.
Do you think that should be brought up that somebody in Kamala's camp or Kamala herself should say, look, I took a risk. I went to Fox and did it. Now it's your turn.
Yeah.
Call him out on it.
Yeah, they could definitely call him out on that. So, in terms of where they go from here, Kamala Harris, I believe, is going on Joe Rogan's podcast at some point soon. I don't think she has
still
yet.
Around? Joe Rogan?
Yeah, he's a big deal in podcasting. He's on the conservative side.
Because he used to do the Fear Factor.
I guess so. Well,
he's the guy that hosted it.
Well, he's a big guy.
Boxing. He did boxing as well.
He's a big guy in podcasting now on the conservative side. I don't think he is completely pro-Trump, so I doubt it would be as adversarial as the Fox News one. But you want to get out there as a candidate in all sorts of different platforms anytime you can reach more people. And she's definitely been doing that recently. Some people have argued, well, why didn't she do this sooner, blah, blah, blah. But she is doing it now, and she certainly seems prepared enough to be doing it.
Do you think there'll be any special interviews? What I mean by that is...
What's that? Yeah.
A few years back, when Barbara Walters was still around, she didn't have a show, but when it came to election time, she'd get one of the candidates in the ABC would put her on for a special interview. Something like that. So that could happen.
Well, I mean... They already had the 60 Minutes one.
Right, but that's a regular show.
But, yeah.
It's not like they decided to say, oh, we have a special program tonight and we're going to have Kamala interviewed by whoever would...
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what you do now that Barbara Walters has passed away.
Maybe we could go on Fallon.
Well, Kamala Harris already went on Stephen Colbert's show, which was...
Okay.
She did, yeah. So that's friendly territory, for one.
Yeah, that is.
In fact, people were complaining because they had a beer together a little bit. She just had maybe a couple sips, and they're like, "Oh, she's having a beer while there's this hurricane going on and all these whatever." Come on.
What's the matter with she has a beer? If she didn't have the beer, she'd still be on the show.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the thing?
Well, it's the gotcha thing, or it's just that no matter what she does, they'll find some way to paint it badly.
I think since she was already on the show anyway, having a beer just makes her more human.
Yeah.
It's not like she had like a fifth of Jack Daniels saying, "Here we go."
Right. She barely, maybe had a couple sips of the beer. Yeah. It's not like she was like, "Yeah, let me chug this whole beer." Oh, she's a drunkard. No, she played it well. That's how you have a beer, and have a little bit and don't make a big deal out of it. And she said she hadn't had a beer in a while even. But I don't know. It's hard to get over the whole thing with just how biased some people are. And you're right. They're just not being objective about it. And that's just how it is. So in terms of general analysis on the election, what people are saying and all, building off of all that, you mentioned there's the men versus women divide.
Yes, there is.
It's a huge gender gap. Now, it's important to note that more women vote than men. And like among white men and white women, for example, white women are 38% of the electorate and white men are 36% of the electorate, if I remember correctly. So it's more white women than men, and the two together are a large portion.
Right.
So that divide is of interest. Obviously, Trump has made inroads with minorities, black men and Hispanic men significantly. Now, part of it is, as I've noted, like we were talking before, a lot of people are like, okay, I was doing well under Trump, and then all this inflation hit under Biden, so Trump was better. Now, obviously, they don't get how inflation works, but if you look at it at that low level, then if that's your basis of your argument of who you're going to vote for, okay, I can see the logic. It's just a bad premise.
If I was running, I'd use history as a guide. I would say...
They don't know history.
Well, I know, but that's how I would tell them. Look, Social Security, all these things that help older people, or anybody for that matter, was started by a Democrat named FDR.
Yep.
The good health care that you can't afford, so you have to go on Obamacare, that was started by a Democrat.
Yep.
All the bad things, that they start, like Reagan, it never got down, it never trickled, that was part of that.
Yep.
So if you read history, you'll see that maybe the Republicans don't exactly do what they claim.
The Democrats do better with the economy in a lot of ways, but the Republicans have a good reputation for doing well with the economy. And that's just how it is. People don't see it. They don't understand it.
So when was the last time we really weren't in debt? Clinton
and Gingrich in the House.
Right, but it was a Democratic president.
Yeah, it was. Like I've said before, if you're a Republican, you credit Gingrich, and if you're a Democrat, you credit Clinton. But either way, that's when we
Clinton's he's the president. He's got to sign off on it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was the first time Republicans had control of the House and or the Senate.
I think
in
that's
like 30 years or something.
But economists already looked at both plans, and they said that would be in a higher debt if Trump gets his way.
Well, the tariffs thing. There's another example.
Oh, my goodness.
You look at that, it's like the way tariffs work is not the way Trump thinks they work. You can't just charge other countries more for goods, just put a tariff on there and get all this money from the other countries. No. Tariffs are paid by our side, by companies on our side, and usually when companies pay more, consumers pay more.
That's right.
And in theory, yes, you can get all your manufacturing to be just the U.S., but everything's going to cost a lot more than it does now. And it's just really screwed up. And that's in conjunction with Goldman Sachs and all these other people saying that Kamala Harris's plan works a heck of a lot better than Trump's plan is. It's just, that's another thing where it's like people are so bad at being objective that they can't even do that analysis or listen to facts on that.
Dig deep in it.
And they don't dig into that. They don't realize how screwed up Trump's tariff plan is.
And the added point, you said that things would cost more.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if that means it costs more for us, it's also going to cost more for people who buy a product overseas. They'll just stop buying from us and buy from other countries. That hurts us. It's a world economy.
Yeah.
They have to realize that, and they don't.
And like I said before, you have to be very careful when you make any big changes in the world economy. You can't just act like you're going to get all this money out of these other countries and not screw things up significantly. There's a lot of careful things to balance and not a lot of obvious solutions. That's another thing with Trump, as I said before. He thinks he's so smart. He thinks he knows so much that other people don't know. He had an interview about the economy a few days ago, and someone was saying it's like a record for like the worst interview he's ever done because he just had no idea what he was doing. But he acted like the other guy had no idea what he was doing. It's like, oh, you guys get this stuff wrong all the time. And I don't remember a lot of details of that because I didn't go into that one significantly, but there's got to be a point where you're like, you don't know how these tariffs work, Donald Trump.
I'll ask you a question on tariffs. Get your opinion.
Okay.
So tariffs will be on other countries. That's what he's saying,
That's what he says. Yes.
One of them will probably be China.
Yes.
Now, if we put tariffs on China, You don't think that they're going to retaliate? All the things that we still get from China because we don't make them over here, drugs and things that we need, man, that'll backfire because, Ping will just say, okay, you want to play that game?
Your President Xi, even if we got money from China by doing tariffs, which we don't actually do that, if there's anything we do that hurts them, of course they'll retaliate.
Exactly.
It is a world economy, and they're a big part of it. And yes, we have a bigger economy than they do, but we're not economically independent. And that's another thing. How much energy are we producing? We're producing more energy than we ever had before. We're producing more now than we were under Trump. If you lie all the time and people just are unwilling to actually research these things and they're biased toward you to begin with, they're not going to try to research these things, and no one can convince them to. And it's ridiculous. But again, that's that 46, 47% who are just incorrigible. Romney couldn't get that 46, 47%. He said 47. And in the case of people who support Republicans, I would say it's probably more like 46%. But I've mentioned that many a time before. So Trump had this weird town hall where basically he was supposed to be answering these questions. And what ended up happening is he answered, I think, a couple questions. And then I guess it was really hot in there or something, and a couple of people fainted. And, he was actually like, hey, can we get this person some help or whatever? But after that, he's like, all right, does anyone else want to faint now? Or whatever. Okay, that's kind of mean, but who cares? With Trump at this point, that's small potatoes. But after that, apparently, right around that point, he had like a Mitch McConnell moment. Remember when Mitch McConnell froze for like 30 seconds or something? And now I heard this. I wasn't completely sure about this because I heard like the rest of the story multiple times. And I heard about this like once. But you said you heard about this as well.
I think I did hear something on it, not the whole story.
But he like froze for a little bit or something was off, I guess, or whatever.
I heard that he was like swaying back and forth.
Well, we'll get to that.
That's what I heard.
Well, maybe he was in the middle there at some point, but I can tell you for sure that he decided, let's not do questions. Who wants to hear questions anyway, right? And then he gets going on, like, we're just going to play music. And he plays, like, a version of Ave Maria, and he plays another version of Ave Maria with, like, Pavarotti singing or something, and he plays a whole bunch of other songs, and he's, for, like, over 30 minutes, he's doing his dancing, which is not very good dancing. I mean, I'm not one to talk about good dancing, but I don't try to dance in these situations, but he just does his whatever stupid bad dancing and he thinks he's so great. So he's doing that for over 30 minutes. I don't know if he was trying to get people to leave or what. Kristi Noem, you remember her, of course, the governor who killed her dog. And she was co-hosting that, and she apparently looked kind of bewildered, looked kind of like she didn't really know what was going on with that. Like, what did he say or do? He's like, let's just dance and DJ for 30 plus minutes. And there is a running commentary about Trump's mental decline. Like, the whole thing we've talked about many a time before with, like, I was the best ever, she was the worst ever, all his superlatives all the time. He's doing more and more of that. He's doing so much of the rambling and going back and forth on different topics that he calls it the weave. He acts like he's trying to do that. What that guy doing with the economic interview that went really badly, when Trump said that he does the weave again, the guy should have been like, okay, how about, since you're so smart and crafty, you can do this weave. How about, let's simplify it for the rest of us here. Don't do the weave. Let's just go talk in straight, simple sentences instead. Act like Trump is actually, like he says he is. He thinks he's so smart and he's better by doing the weave. But, challenge him in a sense to speak more directly and not wander off. To stay on topic. Like, there was a point where the guy asked him about Google, like Alphabet, the Google company. The questioner was like, should they break it up or whatever, the monopoly? And Trump's like, I'm still thinking about that Virginia thing with the voting rolls yesterday and whatever. And then the interviewer's like, the question was about Google. And you just get stuff like that. I don't know. The New York Times wrote a little something about Trump's mental decline, but they were very careful and gingerly whatever about it.
Yeah, but it's the New York Times, and people consider them a little liberal.
I guess.
Whether that's true or not, it's still New York Times.
But the independent media people, some of them are mentioning it because if these are the people who actually watch these Trump rallies, and they're like,
they're
to a large degree, and they're like, these are getting worse. He's rambling on longer. I mean, remember his convention speech? He had a speech, and it was maybe half an hour, and he went on for 90 minutes. It's like, what the heck? He'll play the greatest hits, and it's like, well, sometimes the greatest hits get old. And then, of course, if the crowd's getting bored, he'll throw in something about anti-trans or whatever, and then the crowd gets all cheerful. They're all happy about, like, screw those trans people or whatever, you know. That's like his...
A lot of people are bigots. They're trans, gay, whatever it is.
Yeah, but that's what he does to, like, yay, the crowd's all excited again, because he needs that attention. Like a black hole for attention. But that's the analysis, apparently, that he is mentally declining. Kind of like Biden was mentally declining. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, if you're going to compare the two, there's no question that Biden was mentally declining.
Right.
But he might forget or misspeak, but he didn't come out with stupid crap like, vicious stuff or attacks like Trump does. He came across as somebody who's legitimately just losing it in a nice way, whereas Trump is doing it for Trump's sake.
I saw some psychology expert analysis when they looked at, like, say, the debate or whatever, and they said that Biden, like, remember, he's like, we beat Medicare. And they were saying that's actually not dementia. It's actually like a stuttering thing where you can't get the word out and you go to, like, something a little bit more familiar or whatever, which is interesting because obviously that was widely interpreted as, like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And, I could see the staring off to the side with his mouth agape didn't help him either. I don't think anyone's defending Biden in the sense of, he should still be in there or whatever. It's a very rare opinion, I think, at this point in time. But in conjunction with that, they were saying actually the things Trump is doing, kind of like I was just saying, the increased number of superlatives, the decreased number of new thoughts and new ideas, whatever, are more so signs of dementia. Another thing that's worth noting along those lines is that Kamala Harris released her medical records. And
he hasn't.
And he has not.
Yeah.
And, Trump goes into, she's got such and such, whatever, conjunctivitis and rhinoid something or other. And it's like, you look at those and like, what's going on here? It's like, okay, that's hay fever and, like eczema. That's what that is. There's nothing about hay fever and eczema that's like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is unusual,
if
whatever.
He said conjunctivitis or rhinovirus, he's so far off.
Yeah,
there's no way. That's what he said.
But the people who are stupid that are following him, and by all means, there are plenty of, and Kamala Harris will give him more credit than I will. But a lot of people will hear that like, this sounds terrible. Use a big fancy name for it. Things sound so terrible, and they believe him.
Well, most diseases have a Latin name that sound worse than it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of the flu, influenza. You got influenza.
Well, the flu is the abbreviation, though, off of that. Hay fever and eczema is a little different.
Eczema, alopecia. Or something like that, whatever it is.
There's all sorts of different things. And a lot of these aren't that big a deal. They certainly are not impacting cognitive functionality.
No.
But Trump is, it's a big scam. He's trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the American people. And just, he hid his finances. He's hiding his medical records. He acts like he's like the best, healthiest president ever. It's like, nobody with any intelligence believes he's the healthiest president ever.
I think the healthiest president in recent times, Carter. Look at him. He made 100. Well, you got to have some kind of health.
George W. Bush was very healthy.
Yeah, I never heard anything bad about him.
Yeah,
right.
Remember the whole thing where like he choked on something, an apple or something, and he passed out? That was actually because his blood pressure was very low. He's a very healthy guy. Very healthy guy. I'm not going to disparage him, and I'll give credit where credit is due. He's very healthy. Now, and like you said, Jimmy Carter has survived to 100. At this point, he's still alive. Last I checked.
Yeah.
He got his vote in for Kamala Harris. That was what his big thing was, that he's staying alive long enough to do that. I don't know how much longer he'll live at this point. He made it to 100, of course. So, not a whole lot of milestones left. Maybe he wants to hang around, live long enough to see the election. Who knows? I don't know where he is in terms of health and all that, but he is 100, and most people who do make it to 100, you only live so much longer after that, right?
I don't know what the stats are.
I don't know. But,
Anyway.
It's not like he's going to live another 20 years.
No.
It's not going to happen. Statistically, even another 10 years would be, wow, that's really impressive. Very surprising. But, I mean, you make it to 100, you got something good going on. So, it's got to be pretty healthy, yeah.
It's his beliefs and his lifestyle.
I guess so.
And genetics.
Genetics is definitely a key part of it.
Because if you don't live right, we're talking about Billy.
Billy Carter? Oh.
He didn't quite live that lifestyle, and he paid for it.
Oh. I guess, did he passed away long since, or what?
Oh, he passed away a while back.
Okay.
I forget.
I feel like he must have died so long ago that I don't even remember.
Yeah, he was mentally...
Okay.
I don't know what age he was, but
right. But, yeah. So, for the final topic tonight, what I want to get into is general analysis on the election, what people are saying, what people are predicting, how people think it's going to go. In terms of predicting who will win, I'm looking at this from a whole bunch of different viewpoints. And I'm even delving into the less credible perspectives because why not? You can put a YouTube video on and check some stuff out or whatever. Because a lot of people have a lot to say wherever they are credibility-wise. So first off, you have Nate Silver, who I think today it just dipped slightly under 50 for Harris and slightly over 50 for Trump, actually. But just today, and it's very, very close. It's very close to 50-50. The 538 one is... I think low 50s Harris, high 40s Trump, maybe 55-45 at the most at the moment, but I think a little closer than that. So you would think Harris is more likely to win, but hard to say.
That margin of error is always...
Yes.
You got to look at that.
Yes. Margin of error is a very key thing. You have, of course, Alan Lichtman with his keys, his 13 keys, and his prediction is that Kamala Harris is going to win because enough of the keys went her way, and he's decided he made his prediction. So I also looked into some of the other more controversial sources, and I'm not condoning any of the controversial sources. I don't mean to impinge on my credibility as a logical, rational person who likes probabilities and all that, but I looked into them anyway, because why not? So you got the astrology people. And like I said, if you want to believe astrology has no relevance, whatever, it's not accurate, I'm not inherently disagreeing with you. I'm just saying I'm going to listen to it.
It's fodder.
Whatever it is, maybe it's nothing, maybe it's all a big deal. But whatever it is, I checked it out for a little bit. And the astrologers seem to say they think Kamala Harris is going to win. And it's going to be a lot of turmoil after the election.
Did you use a Ouija board?
I did not use a Ouija board.
Okay.
So I didn't go that far. I didn't ask the spirits what's going on. But I'm just saying, the astrologers are like, this is in this, this person's sign is in this house, and this is, the whatever rising is this, and this is going to this planet's thing. And, and it's just
no Magic 8 Ball?
No Magic 8 Ball, no.
Just checking.
And I think there was a tarot card reader in there somewhere, and I think she was also, Kamala Harris is going to win. And there was a guy who says he reads energies, and he said what's going to happen, basically, is Kamala Harris is going to win, and then Trump is going to steal it, and Trump is going to become president, which was interesting. But she still wins. So that was an interesting take, and it did get me thinking about the possibility of that happening, regardless of any validity with the prediction, just the possibility of that happening. And there was another lady who had a near-death experience when she was younger. I forget how old exactly, but quite young, definitely a minor. And she has whatever communications with the beyond, and apparently she works with the FBI and helps them solve cases. I don't know, Maybe there's something to this. Maybe there isn't.
Clairvoyant?
Yeah, I think something like that. Clairvoyant, I guess. I don't know the specifics. But she said that she has, predicted all the elections. And she got them all right in however long she's been doing this. And she predicts Kamala Harris is going to win. Like I said, I don't know exactly what to make of it. I don't know if you want to give it absolutely zero credibility to all these people. You can. If you want to give them a tiny little bit, you want to give them a lot of credit, whatever, I don't know. I feel like the logical, rational people usually look at all this stuff and they're like, this is all ridiculous. It means nothing. So I wanted to acknowledge that and say that might be the case, and I'm not going to stake any of my credibility on this stuff. But I figure why not look into it and see what they said.
Well,
so they all think Harris is going to win.
I'll use a football analogy.
Okay.
You're on the goal line.
Mm-hmm.
You call a play up the middle, and the defense stops you.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, what a bad call. But
Right.
if he scores, it was a great call.
Right.
Same thing here. All these things don't come true. They're going to laugh at him. But if they're right, wow, she predicted it. It's like the Kennedy with Gene Dixon.
Uh-huh.
Everybody, she got so much notoriety because she said it was going to happen. She got lucky. But
right. Well, that's the thing. It's like it could be like predicting a coin flip. Like I said, I got a coin, heads or tails, and I pick either heads or tails, and do I get it right or not? And then the problem is when people ignore when they get it wrong. It's like, say I predicted 40 different things, and they're all pretty unlikely, and 2 of them happened. Then it's like, well, of course, you look at those 2, it looks really impressive, but you have to take into account the other 38.
Yeah, that's true.
There was something I heard about where you'll have these mass emailings, and someone with the mass emailing will say, this stock is going to go way up and do this, blah, 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 or this is going to do this, and this is going to go up and this is going to go down, whatever. And they send out a whole bunch of different permutations of a combination of stuff to a bunch of people. Let's say they send it to 100,000 people. And then whatever actual thing happens has gone out to, let's say, 100 of the 100,000 people.
Okay.
And they go to those 100 people and it's like, look, see, I predicted exactly what was going to happen, and it was right. I mean, if I was a disingenuous person, I could, like right now, I could be like, I predict Kamala Harris is going to win the election, and she's going to get about 51% of the vote, and Trump is going to get 49%. I predict Donald Trump is going to win the election. He's going to get 49%. She's going to get 47%. Or she's going to get 50. He's going to get 49. Whatever, I could literally say a whole bunch of different things, and one of them would be right.
There you go.
It's like when you have the NFL playoffs, and you get down to 4 teams, and you're like, the Super Bowl is either going to be team, well, say A and B are in one conference, and C and D are in the other conference. The Super Bowl will either be between A and C, A and D, B and C, or
right.
B and D.
Exactly.
One of those 4 is correct. And like I said, I could, edit it and be like, I think it's going to be this. But anyone can make the right prediction among all the wrong predictions. The question is, can you make only one prediction and stand by it and, work with that? Like the lady who said she's gotten them all right, she said that like, a year ago, whatever, she's like, the energy was like, it's not going to be Biden or Trump. Okay, that's interesting. We even had a thought before one point where it's like, either Biden or Trump is going to win, but how could either of them possibly win? It's like, so but someone has to.
This lady has always gotten everything right.
That's what she says.
She's on a hot streak, but her streaks
possible.
can be.
It's possible.
You can go on a cold streak after that.
It's possible.
I'd have to know what it was that she did or said in her looking into the issue to find out why she just didn't go, yeah, I think this person's going to win. There had to be some basis.
Right.
Even if it's out there, it's still got to be a basis.
Right. I mean, maybe people will get information from the future and they're like, this is what's going to happen. Or maybe they feel the energy. Here's where things are going and, whatever. But it's not anything inherently obvious where most people believe in that or know about that or whatever, if it is true. So we are probably best served retaining a reasonable amount of skepticism. And I'll listen to these different viewpoints. Anything that has some logical basis to it. The premise might be way off. That's the concern. But if they're like, okay, I can perceive this, and this is going to happen, and whatever. Another thing I had heard was apparently somebody from the future or something said that whoever wins the election, and it's not going to be Trump, is only going to be in there for like 6 months, and then they're not going to be in power anymore or something like that.
This is somebody from the future.
Yeah, apparently. That's just another thing I'd heard. But I heard this a while back. Well, like, I think February I heard this. And that was before Biden dropped out. And it was kind of like, okay, Trump's not going to win, but who's going to win? And I was like, I guess that means Biden's going to win. But, Now it sounds like,
Well,
is Kamala Harris going to win? She's only going to be in there 6 months?
I'll answer that.
Uh-huh.
I'll play devil's advocate.
Uh-huh.
Being that you're a Marvel and science fiction buff.
Yes.
In the science fiction things like Star Trek, they say, if it's from the future, you can't say anything about the past. It'll change the timeline.
Right.
So the future cannot interfere.
Well, the thing about this information from the future is the election has so many moving parts that no matter what I say, there's no way that a large quantity of people, percentage-wise, enough to make a difference is going to hear and change their mind because, assuming I did get information from the future, there's no way enough people would hear it from me and that would spread out so far that it would inherently make a difference all by itself. I mean, you could say, okay, everything affects everything, but I don't think the information is like that where people are like, oh, the future said Kamala Harris is going to win. I'm going to vote for Trump, and I wasn't going to vote at all, and I live in a swing state.
The future comes by, and then that person hears it. And it's already happened twice, trying to get rid of Trump.
Uh-huh.
Because somebody heard something and said, oh, the future said she's going to win, so I got to, or he's going to win, or so whatever, so I'm going to assassinate his ass. If the future didn't interfere, it might not have happened.
Another thing that someone predicted was a cardiac event, I think for Donald Trump, and I think within the next week of now. But this is another energy or psychic or whatever. It's one of those. So if that happens, okay. But, by no means am I going to stake anything on it.
No,
it
I
might happen, it might not. But I'm just saying, what else did they
some
predict?
people believe that.
Yeah, but it sounds like what's going to happen. The best analysis I have, factoring in just the numbers and the probabilities and the experts, the polling averages, all that, polling error is off up to 4 points.
Yes.
Oh, one thing I want to note with the polling error side of things that I forgot. We can get back to that now that we've gone into the less rational, logical stuff. We'll get back to the actual rational, logical stuff that I will stake something on because, that's academic to me. And I believe in academics and numbers and math very much so. And they say that when you have a presidential poll, it often tends to be off 4 points in either direction. And at this point, they're like I said, they're basically dead even. Now, in the last 2 election cycles, Trump did better than expected by, we'll say, 4 points or whatever. Maybe not quite 4 points, but he did better than expected. In 2016, like I said, I think the real thing was that a lot of people decided last minute, they were undecided, then they went to Trump. Let's try something new, we don't care, or this Comey thing is the last straw, that's it, no Hillary. In 2020, when they're polling people, a lot of Democrats were staying home because of the pandemic, Republicans weren't. More Democrats are entering the phone. And another thing they didn't take into account was the education level divide. If they got more people who were higher education level, they didn't realize that was percentage-wise more Democrats, so they got more Democrats in the sample. Because there is a correlation, largely, not everything, but with more educated people, more Democratic, less educated people, less Democratic. Just, that's a correlation that's built up. Now, this time, there are 2 types of polling that they're doing. One is the normal stuff, and that looks like it did in 2022, which is basically I think the Democrats are predicted to do pretty well, and they might end up doing better than that or whatever. I don't know exactly what they expect them to do, but it looks kind of like that. The other thing is this weird new type of polling where it works off of, you ask people, who did you vote for last time, Trump or Biden or whatever. And then when you get your results, you recalibrate to be the results we got back, 65% said they voted for Biden last time, 35% said they voted for Trump. So let's recalibrate because we know that we have too many Biden supporters in the poll, so we're going to readjust it. Which, number one, a lot of times people don't remember who they voted for. I personally can't imagine that, but that's how it is.
Yeah,
And sometimes it's like memory bias. You want to say you voted for the winner, even if you didn't. So the results of that look kind of like the 2020 election. So they've taken into account these biases, and that's controversial new type of polling, which you can only go so far. You got to be careful. If the electorate changes significantly between 2 elections, it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't help any. But that's what they were dealing with here. I don't think they're necessarily going to have that 4 point one way or the other swing like they did. And it's not obvious that, there was a 4 point or whatever bias where there were more Trump votes than we expected in 16 and 20, so it's going to be the case again this time. No. They've taken a lot into account. It could very well not be the case this time. They have a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure out how to fix problems like this when they're pollsters. Anyway, all right, so that covers it all pretty well. I think we can go ahead and wrap up now.
All right.
Any closing thoughts in general with all this, or what?
We covered it. I'm just waiting for it. Like you said, that one event might still be out there waiting for it. It's so close. I mean, any topic we cover, if we just change our opinion just slightly, that could make the difference. That's it.
Even if you change your opinion.
I mean, not us personally, but the voters.
Oh.
The voters, they get behind, they get in there and go to vote, and all of a sudden they say, now that I think about it, maybe I'll just vote for so-and-so instead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, of course, it's the swing states. It's going to come about.
Yeah. The 7 swing states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina.
That's right. That's what you're saying.
It's not hard to memorize them when you hear about them as much as I do.
No, you hear them all the time. I hear them all the time.
And then Florida is probably not a swing state, but in theory, there's a small chance Harris could win it. And then the next one after that is Texas. And Florida is like, at best, 1 out of 5 chance she wins it, and maybe 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 10. And Texas is like 1 out of 10 or less that she wins it. And all the rest are like, 98, 99%, it's going this way. It's like those are not swing states.
You've looked into all the statistics, right?
I look into a lot of statistics.
So here's the question. I don't know whether you're looking at this. How much do you think celebrity endorsements, whether it be ex-presidents, Taylor Swift, whoever, really make a difference? Do you think somebody is actually going to say, well, Obama wants me as a black man to vote Democratic, or they're going to just stick to their guns and say, no, I don't like Harris? And
I think some people will follow Taylor Swift. She's extremely popular, but I don't think it's going to be like a huge
But it's
factor.
a close election in a swing state.
Yep.
Theoretically.
She's from Pennsylvania also.
Yeah. So I just don't...
that's the thing. They keep talking about all these things are on the margins. Well, this doesn't usually move voters that much.
That's right.
But it's so freaking close that if you convince 20,000 people in Pennsylvania to vote one way versus the other way, that could be the entire election right there.
Oh, yeah.
Because the rest is all balanced out enough, and that's enough electoral votes on its own. It's pretty much whoever wins Pennsylvania. You can still win the election without Pennsylvania if you get a lot of the other swing states. But, it's like if Harris wins Texas, it's like, okay, she's going to win the whole election.
Yeah, but
if she wins Florida, it's like she's going to win the whole election. Because it all goes the same direction. Whatever you think is going to happen, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan all vote together. Pretty much. The last few elections, they've all voted together. There's just kind of the vibe. Which way did everything go? It's not like, well, in these states, it was way more Harris than we thought. And in those states, it was way more Trump than we thought. It doesn't seem to go that way. Sometimes you get, not landslides in this current environment, but relatively speaking, other times it's much closer.
Here's a crazy way of looking at something.
Sure.
How about this? We know that Carter just turned 100.
Yeah.
And if you were to get up and say, look, I'm 100, I don't know how long I'm going to last, but before I go, do me one favor, people of Georgia, vote for Harris. How much would that swing?
I don't know. Well, you know who he supports anyway.
We know, but if he were to speak it, how many people would... He earned his respect. Maybe not as president, but for everything else he did. Georgians have a big respect for that man.
A lot of people were not born yet when he was president.
Oh, absolutely.
They might not know who he is.
Well, if you don't know who Carter is and you're a Georgian resident, something is wrong. Hey.
Yeah, you should know who he is, but who knows what people are on top of when it comes to history.
I know, we can argue all day or debate. Yeah. When you get something this close, we're just poking at things.
Yeah. So anyway, we can wrap up at this point now. I'll get this up within the next few days or so, I figure. And then something big happens. We'll probably record again on Tuesday or Thursday of next week with the response to the big thing that happened. And if nothing big happens, we can hold off for a bit.
That sounds right.
And there will obviously be plenty to talk about after the election regardless. So we'll figure it out from there. All right. That's good for tonight, and we are out. I'll just chop all this part out, obviously. I don't think it's even like a blooper kind of thing.
You can slip in a Geico ad.
Just look at a Geico ad.
All right.